Welcome to Psyched for Psychology, a Nystrom & Associates podcast. Our hosts, Michelle Iverson and Brett Cushing, are both licensed marriage and family therapists at Nystrom & Associates. Each week, they talk about all things mental health and therapy, and you get a chance to dive into specific psychology topics that help promote personal development and wellness. And now, here are your hosts, Michelle and Brett.
Welcome to another edition of our podcast, Psyched for Psychology. Today we're going to be talking about joy to the workplace.
Joy to the workplace.
Well, we're familiar with joy to the world at Christmas time, but how about everyday joy in the workplace? Is that possible? Sounds really counterintuitive.
Well, I think, too, it's a really interesting topic given all of the media attention and on things like quiet quitting and the Great Resignation. Like, there's a lot of, I think, kind of valid and really kind of interesting, like, from a sociological perspective on why those things are happening. It also doesn't kind of give any kind of attention to, like, for those people who are working, how they do find joy in the work that they do and that they love.
Right, and that's why I'm really excited about this, because 60% of our adult life is spent at work. Mm-hmm. Think of that. More than half of our time is spent in our work environment. And wouldn't it be wonderful if that was a place where there's joy and we feel energized and we feel connected? And that's what I'm hoping we can encourage our listeners with today. And hopefully there's managers and executives also listening. And what I'm going to be talking about with our audience today, and you and I are going to be sharing, is really information that I gleaned from a July 17th, 2019 edition of the Harvard Business Review that addressed this topic of joy in the workplace, namely suggesting that joy is and should actually be pursued as an integral part of the workplace. So much of what I'll be sharing and Michelle's going to be sharing is talking about this information that was based on research from this Harvard Business Review article. So let's jump in and talk about joy at the workplace. And maybe already some people have kind of considered joy at the workplace. It hasn't even crossed their mind. Michelle, do you have an expectation of joy in your workplace here with Nystrom & Associates?
Yeah, I think it's that, part of it too is like where, specifically where we work, we want that feeling of, at least for me, right, that feeling of the connection community. Because you're exactly right, we spend so much of our waking adult life engaged in work. We want to have that feeling of like community and purpose and meaning as well too. So it's not even just about where we work, but it's also the type of work we do. I think that's a big part of why I went into the therapy field. Right. I think you did too, Brett, right. Of that feeling of us getting joy from our ability to work with clients and to see amazing improvements in their life from the support that we provide them.
Absolutely. I do feel very fortunate because not everybody has the opportunity and the privilege that you and I have of receiving such joy in walking with people through really difficult times in their lives. It's such a privilege and it is fulfilling. Not everybody has that. And yet there still can be joy even when the job we do isn't necessarily fulfilling, because there is that sense of, like you were talking about, community. And interestingly enough, 90% of people actually expect joy in their workplace. And even though 90% of people expect it, only 37% actually experience that.
No, that's a big gap.
That's a huge gap. But think about it. What happens when we get the news? I got the job and this place looks great and the people are wonderful and everyone seems to be having a good time and it's a nice setting and everyone's smiling. And so we go in with all these expectations and then we get into the learning curve and we understand that, oh, wow, these people are just like people everywhere, and there's gossiping and there's negativity and there's stress and there's unrealistic demands. And so the joy is there in the beginning with all sorts of expectations, and then it's lost. And yet we still hold out for it. We still expect it. I think that's really noteworthy. And people listening might be thinking that too. Like, yeah, you know, I do. I remember when I thought my job was going to be this great place. Well, I also want to highlight not only that we have an expectation for joy, But joy is intrinsically valuable and it's inherently human. What in the world do I mean by that? It is inherently human to experience and to pursue joy just for the sake of joy. It doesn't lead to anything else. I don't pursue joy so that I can experience something as a result of having joy. I pursue joy just for the sake of having joy. It's part of the human condition. And I think what you were talking about earlier about the sense of connection. When people have joy and they experience joy, have you ever noticed what they do? When people are laughing, for instance, do you notice? Well, let me ask you, what do you notice when people are laughing and they have some joy? What do you notice in their behaviors?
We kind of really notice it's one of the things we're really good at as therapists and noticing in other people is their nonverbals.
Yes.
Because that's 80% of how we communicate with other people. It's not the words that we use, but how we nonverbally express that with other people. So I really, for us, in working at Nystrom, I got the wonderful opportunity to get to open and run a new clinic and a smaller clinic in this new model that we've done. And so that was a great opportunity to be able to say, what culture do I want here, right? Do we want a culture that brings joy? And that is not only, of course, what I would want, and I'd want any of my employees to want as well, too, to have that be their experience, especially when we do difficult work. But then how do I gauge and assess for that? I'm looking for things of course, what people are telling me, but I'm also looking at nonverbals, too, right? Do we have a team that's willing and wanting to communicate with each other? Talking about things that aren't just related to work. A team that's supporting each other, laughing, having fun.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because at the clinic I run in Lakeville, we have just a wonderful team. They are really fun people. I so appreciate them and I respect them. And I sent out an email, it was last week Friday, actually. And I just because we got our own personal lives too and things going on. And I wanted to remind everybody in the email that we are people first and we're employees second. And part of being a person is this idea of joy. We're going to have joy. We expect it even in the workplace, and we yearn to experience it. And when you speak of the nonverbals, what happens when people do experience joy and they begin to laugh? It reminds me of, I think we talked about this in the episode, is laughter really the best medicine? And we talked about how when people laugh, what do? They turn to each other and they look at each other.
Yes.
Or at a football game, it's football season, something exciting happens. People don't just stand up and look at the TV or look at the field. They turn and they look to each other. And so joy, in fact, I heard a famous writer, C.S. Lewis, wrote Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. He said, joy is not complete until it is shared. And so I think when we can have joy, and people are still listening probably thinking, joy is not going to happen. But if we can have this happen, we notice how it does create bonds and it creates connection and a sense of community, which is part of that experience that I think we're really expecting and wanting at work. So that's kind of what I'm talking about here is that joy it's not only enjoyable, it's connective. And companies, I think especially as you were saying with the Great Resignation and people quietly quitting, companies are wanting people to connect with their employees and employees with customers. And joy is a tremendous asset for that to be able to happen. Yet there's a disconnection, right? As we've been talking about, joy is expected and yet it's not experienced. Now, in the article with the Harvard Business Review, they highlighted that the joy in sports that we see and we experience, they asked if that joy can be replicated in the workplace. And notice, as we said, when we do laugh, we do have this connection. And wouldn't that be great if that were the case? And good news, Michelle, that's exactly what they found.
Good.
However, what gets in the way, do you think, of joy being experienced in the workplace? Why is it not? If it's possible, what gets in the way?
What gets in the way? Well, I think for a lot of people, I love that, and this actually might kind of speak to why there's actually an entire field of psychology that's very, very interested in workplace dynamics. And it's called IO, Industrial Organizational Psychology. So if anybody listening is really interested in a career in this field, but maybe the type of work that we do isn't quite what you're looking for, but you're very interested in businesses and the psychology behind running businesses, that's a great place to look. And IO psychology is about trying to understand things like this gap, right? Why do people expect joy, but then don't experience it? Right. And so thinking about like what gets in the way, what are the barriers, that's what that entire field does, is trying to figure out what those barriers are and how we can remove them. Sometimes one of the biggest barriers comes down to communication, right? And if I'm walking into a position with expectations and I feel like those expectations aren't being met, right? Is there something to do with the communication that's happening with me and my boss, or connection that's happening there, right? Or from higher leadership on down?
Right. And then we have, when that communication is lost, we tend to question, can I really trust this person anymore? Does this person really have my best interests involved? That's an excellent point.
So it's all about helping companies. My background is more in family systems work, and I've always been really interested in how family systems is related to business systems, right?
Me too.
Family systems, it's all about, it might be an interesting analogy when it comes to work, but this is the analogy we use in family systems. We think of a family as a system of interconnected cogs, right? The machine won't run, right, unless everybody is running together and running smoothly. But oftentimes in families, we get an interruption in that system. If somebody is struggling or especially has a behavior that's being, unhelpful for the rest of the system, well, we can't really affect change unless somebody's willing to do something differently, right?
Right. And I'm really hoping if we have executives listening to this, they will take the initiative to do something different, to change that system, that predictable pattern of behavior in work environments that inhibits joy. And speaking of inhibitions, you were talking about communication is one of the ways we kind of have joy impeded. I also think it's the inhibitions that come from that pattern, that system of operation in our work environment. So specifically, we resist vulnerability at work, right? And so think about that for somebody that's listening. What's your work environment like? Are you able to be vulnerable? It reminds me of another podcast we did on vulnerability and the benefits and the power of being vulnerable. But in a workplace, to be vulnerable can be looked as a very unfavorable thing to be. We're not to be vulnerable at work. And so we don't express the full range of emotions. We only express in our work environment those emotions that are acceptable, that are approved of, that are favorable in that environment. Now, I would suggest this is really quite inhumane. Anytime that we do not allow the full expression of human emotion, that's by definition being inhumane. And so I think what we favor and what we prop up is professionalism. We need to be professional. I remember growing up in the 80s, everybody seemed to wore a dress or a suit all the time. And so I do think professionalism has been knocked down a few notches, which is good. But I think professionalism still, in terms of how we behave, expression of emotions, that is sort of code for rules that are acceptable and rules that are not in the workplace. And along with that, what are emotions that are allowed here and what are not allowed here? And again, notice how inhumane that can be when we're saying, when you're here, 60% of your life, you need to act and you need to behave and you need to have these feelings. This is what's allowed and this is what's not. I think these are big things that really inhibit joy in the workplace.
Interestingly enough, same true for families as well too, right?
Yes.
These are those unspoken rules and those that really can affect the dynamic of a family. When we have those unspoken rules that can affect the dynamic of a workplace as well too.
Right. It reminds me, one of my professors in grad school, Sandra Wilson, wrote a book, Released from Shame, and she had these wonderful cartoons that talked about and showed in dysfunctional homes. She called it, that was the name of the course, Counseling Dysfunctional Families. But everybody was walking around with blinders on. And somebody would be having serious emotion in the midst of this family gathering. And yet everybody had blinders on to that. And yet that's exactly what happens in the workplace too. And we don't acknowledge that and we walk away from it. So these are things I think that really inhibit joy in the workplace. Now, the good news, again, is that joy actually can be realized there. And first we got to know, like, well, what's getting in the way? So hopefully we've identified some of that. What the Harvard Business Review study found was that there are three things that need to happen in the workplace and can actually replicate the same kind of joy by sports teams. And it's harmony, impact, and acknowledgement. And I just reworded it because in my own mind, it just made a little more sense. I'm thinking the three things are harmony, clarity, and party. Gotta have a party. So
gotta have a party.
Gotta have a party in the workplace. So let's take a look at that. Let's look at harmony, first of all. What they found in their study is that harmony promotes joy. So we think about this. When teams, I just watched my beloved Green Bay Packers. I'm sorry, we just lost half of our listeners. But
everybody just quit.
Sorry, just all the joy just went out of the room for some people here. Sorry about that. But you see, whether it's your team or some other team, when they accomplish something great, there's just this immediate kind of reaction, this outlet of emotion. And teams will dance together. They'll go and high five each other. They'll actually go and hug each other. And it's not premeditated, like, hey, we're joyful. We need to express this. It happens. And it's, again, part of being human. And harmony is allowing that to happen, to be together and to celebrate and valuing the diversity of strengths that are going on within the company. And not just diversity in terms of ethnicity, although that is extremely important, but diversity of talent and how everybody is working together in harmony to accomplish something. So I look at a football team and you have everybody, even people on the bench who haven't even been playing, and they're all a part of the celebration. And there's harmony there. There's congruency, if you will. And all the roles are coming together and acknowledging that everybody's contributing to this, from the person that seems most prominent to the person that might seem the most insignificant. So that's one of the things they found: harmony. And people might be thinking, hopefully, they've had an experience where there's been real harmony in their work environment, how good that really felt. Right.
That's one of the things that, that's a great example of, really engaging everybody to understand how their role does to, in our field, serve people, right? Every single person in our team, and I love to remind them of that, is a big, big part of helping to serve that client, even if you are not the clinician serving that client, because that client's experience goes from the second that you step into our client space. Is it warm? Is it welcoming? Are you greeted in a way that feels safe and supportive to you? So many clients get that experience at our clinic, and that's been step one in their healing process before they've even met with the actual clinician themselves.
That's an excellent point. And I think of people who are in our clinics, or people that are kind of those who are the first impression people for the company. And sometimes they get paid the least. And yet their role is integral, like you said, because it is the first impression somebody gets. And what do we know about first impressions? I mean, they are absolutely huge. And so we need to be realizing, everybody from CEO to front desk person, that we are all in this together, and that there has to be some harmony about this. But I also think we're touching on the next aspect that they found in their research, and they talk about impact, and I call it clarity. Clarity. Look at what we did together. And so there's an acknowledgement of the impact. There's acknowledgement that, hey, we did this. We accomplished it. And I think, that's what teams do. When there's, even if it's a first down to a touchdown, we did it. And it's not I did it, we did it. And so that's why I think there needs to be clarity in our work environments. If there's going to be joy, we need to have clarity. What are we trying to accomplish? And how do I know if I've actually accomplished it? Or is it I'm just punching the clock?
Right. And that's where communication becomes key, right? Being able to have those conversations with employees, engagement of all your employees, and talking about things like some of the conversations we've had recently of being able to show and kind of for everybody to be able to see, here's how many people we've served. Here's how much of this gap in mental health care that we filled by being able to open and be a part of a community that's been, for us, as needed more mental health services and care. And for us to be able to do that, we, as a leader, I could assume that people just know, but instead I'm going to actively communicate that so everybody can know and feel what amazing impact their work is having, again, at any level in the clinic.
Yeah, right. And people can't always draw the connection. We can't connect the dots. I'm doing my job. I can't wait for my lunch break, and then I can't wait to go home. And clarity about the mission, what we're doing and why we're doing this, how this relates to bettering other people, even if you're manufacturing cars, just helping people draw that connection. And hopefully leaders are taking the initiative to establish that clarity on a regular basis, because there is something called mission drift, and we lose sight of that. And so there always needs to be this constant reaffirming of what the mission is and helping people see where they fit with that. Like, it is so important. Just like you were talking here at my clinic, I tell the people at the front desk, you are integral to people and you have no idea. In fact, I even had a client tell me once that I'm so thankful for the person at the front desk. I came in really anxious and she just listened to me for a couple minutes and I'm already feeling calmed down. And we need to let people know, hey, you did this to somebody. And that's what we're about. And so I'm hoping people are realizing, okay, we need to have clarity, we need to have harmony. And even if it's not coming then from the top management, we can still find this ourselves and we can define this ourselves. Where do I fit and what's the mission that we're really about here? So then the best part, the party. Or, as the Harvard Business Review put it, acknowledgement.
Yes.
Okay. Why is a party important?
Well, it's really funny, a little ironic we're talking about this right now. As we're recording this, we are in the middle of parties for both of our clinics right now to show how much we care and appreciate our employees. When we throw these parties, it's, for one, it's a wonderful break to just be together as a team. And to just spend time together, get to know each other better, and just be able to, at the same time, to celebrate a lot of the amazing work that we have done throughout the year. And so, in a way, we're talking about literal parties in that sense. But I also think about, is there mini parties, too, in ways that we can celebrate our wins and our accomplishments and things that we've done together as well as a team.
Right, and it doesn't always have to be a huge party.
Right.
For me, sometimes I bring in pastry for my peeps, and just, hey.
Do you call it for that?
I
pastry
do, yeah.
For my peeps day.
It's like pastry for peeps day, and hey, thanks everybody for what you're doing. And yeah, it's just, people don't need a lot. I think management always thinks people, they just want more money. And no one's going to say no to more money.
No.
And yet, at the same time, I think what really motivates people is when they know that they're appreciated and they can see, hey, I'm a part of accomplishing something else, and there's harmony. We're working together in this. And then we do have a party. We do celebrate it. I remember when I was in Cub Scouts, our team won the Cub Scout Championship. And I remember my dad, oh man, it was so cool. It was big. And I remember my dad, who was the coach, and he said, no, don't forget this. You're a part of a championship team. I mean, what are we, like sixth graders? He's so profound. But I remember. He's like, remember, because you may never be a part of a championship team ever again. And then we went to Capri Pizza, the best pizza in the world in West Dallas, Wisconsin. Little plug there for Capri. And I still remember the party.
Yeah.
I still remember the party, and it was so fun. And I don't know if we really appreciate and value in our workplaces what that does for people. Yeah. Again, they're people first and employees second. And we need to have a party, and we need to show appreciation. And in that party, like when we had I know you have your...
ours is coming up still, yes.
Yeah, we had our employee appreciation lunch last week, and we just laughed. And there was like this full expression of, emotion. It was just uninhibited. It just came naturally. We laughed a lot. And then we did the funny pictures, like everyone do the mock laugh, like look like you're having a good time and smile and laugh. But it was funny because there was an uninhibited expression and it's a release too, I think. So I think these are really important parts that they highlighted in their study. They again called it harmony, impact, and acknowledgement. I call it harmony, clarity, and party. Well, I think I'd like to share, just to underscore this a little bit more, how joy has been researched by Harvard Business Review. And they found specifically joy in team sports can be achieved in our work environments. And there's these 3 integral characteristics we just talked about. But it suggests that the full range of experiences that visibly yield joy in team athletics, namely the harmony, impact, and acknowledgement, they can have much the same effect in the business world. Wouldn't it be cool if you went to work and everyone's high-fiving each other and fist bumping all the time? Wouldn't that be a fun work environment for us? That would be fun. That could be. So they looked at what drives joy. And again, these 3 things, harmony, impact, and acknowledgement. And according to a survey of more than 500 employees, they found that joy stems from believing one's work is truly meaningful. And employees who believe their company make a positive societal contribution and feel personally committed to achieving that, they have greater joy as well. And when they see a strategy in addition to that, that also increases the experience of joy at their work. So I think this is really important for us to be thinking about our own work environment. Am I personally seeing that I'm committed to achieving my company's vision, or am I just a cog in the wheel here? Any thoughts on this when you think about this, Michelle? Any thoughts about maybe for yourself or other places you've worked where you've really understood your role and the role of others on your team?
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those where I've had a number of different experiences like that. And I think there's always been commonalities of what's always helped me to feel that way. And I'm big on family systems work, so I'm always going to say communication. Good communication was a big part of it, but also support, right? Feeling supported by my boss, even if in support didn't have to ever come from I would get what I would want, but support would always occur when I could make sure that my needs were heard, that my boss was willing to hear all of it, the good or the bad, and that I would get follow-up. And again, it's closing the communication loop, right? If I would hear hey, we can't do X, Y, Z because of A, B, C, then I would get some clarity on that, right? That brings back to the clarity comment. I would get an understanding of that, and that would help me to be able to better understand my role and what will help me to be more effective.
Right. Yeah, I love what you said about follow-up, too. And it reminds me of what Mark Arnold, our CEO here at Nystrom, had said recently in one of our meetings, was that basically remembering people are people. Our clients are people. Our colleagues are people. And what's the commonality? We're always dealing with people. In other words, people come first. And when we think about that, and I think about the follow-up, there was a personal connection that you had. And it reminds me of how that increases joy, according to the study by the Harvard Business Review. So they found out, for instance, people who understand that their role, when they understand their role and the role of others on their team, they have about a 20% more higher indication of joy in their workplace. When there are strong bonds within the team, again, about 25% greater report of experiencing joy in the workplace. That's as it relates to harmony. As it relates to impact, people who said, my talents are utilized effectively, they reported their sense of joy at about 74% versus 39%. As it relates to impact, they also found that people who said, my role is critical to the success of the team, 74% said they had more joy versus 44%. And then when we think of that acknowledgement or that party kind of aspect, people who said they shared success and it was celebrated within the team, they had 25% more experience of joy in their work environment. And then people who said their colleagues acknowledge others' contributions to team successes. Once again, they had about 25% increase in joy in their work environment. So we can see, hopefully we've built the case that joy is important and it's natural. It's something we seek as human beings. It's something we even expect in our work environment. And it is something we can expect if we're intentional about this. And so even if our upper management are sort of tone deaf to this in our work environments, we can create this. We can still pursue it ourselves and try and find where we fit. We can find how we fit. We can find clarity of what I'm really here for and make sure we're celebrating it as best we can with the people around us.
Right. And if we're looking for a new career path, it'd be something that we'd want to take a look at, that meaning and purpose. Right? Does this feel like that's something that is going to breathe that for me? For me, I would never find meaning and purpose in being like a hedge fund manager. Like I'd make a ton of money,
right?
But that would never bring me that meaning and purpose. And so that would be a factor, something to think about, and then finding those workplaces that feel like it brings that for you too.
Well, I'm so glad we were able to talk about this today because I don't know about you, Michelle, people who come to my office, again, 60% of their adult life is their work environment. And their work environments contribute to their mental health, positively or negatively. And so we tried to focus today on how it can affect them positively. And so I really hope that those who are listening, if you're in upper management, take some of this and make some changes. And if you're not, you're feeling like I'm powerless. No, you're not. There are things you can still do to try to promote that sense of harmony, clarity for yourself, and make sure you're celebrating what you do and when you accomplish things that are true to your own values.
And if you're really interested in this topic, be sure to check out our next week's episode. It's going to be all about trauma-informed workplaces.
Well, that sounds really interesting because that is a significant factor as well.
Yes, it is.
So we hope you can all tune in. Thanks so much for joining us. Please email us your comments at podcast@nystromcounseling.com. Let us know if you have any ideas for future topics that you'd like us to address, that you'd be psyched to hear us talk about. And you can learn about Nystrom & Associates and all our available mental health services by going to nystromcounseling.com.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.